All right, so this is a tour of the arrange window, just reviewing some of the things we looked at last class and highlighting some important um, things in the arrange window that I want you to remember. This is the transport bar. Um, we typically don't use the transport bar. We use hotkeys. Space is play, space is stop, return gets us back to the beginning. We're not worried too much about a lot of these, except for to say that this is the loop button, and this is the auto punch button. And both of these can be adjusted by clicking and dragging at the beginning or the end, or you can even move it by grasping them in the center. And this is a metronome, which later on will matter. We didn't really make much use of it tonight. In going through this information, the most important stuff for our purposes is that this is the tempo, which you can click and drag and change, or you can click in and change like that. Just double click and then right and then return. We can change the subdivision of the matrix editor here. It's in 4/4 time, and it's subdivided by 16th notes. We could have more subdivisions or less subdivisions depending on what we want. And I don't know if anyone remembers, it's not that big of a deal because normally it's set to smart, but depending on what you're doing editing wise, you can change where Logic insists on snapping audio objects you move around in relation to this matrix, right? So if I have an audio object and I have it set to bar, it only allows me to move it from, the beginning of in bar increments. And so the subdivision does matter when you're editing, but generally speaking, if it's in 4/4, it's going to be 4/4, 16th note, and this will be set to smart. And then you can change things up here for editing. That'll matter more later on. This is where we choose what our cursor will look like. So we have here the pointer tool, and then I have the marquee tool. Whatever is in this secondary position, you'll see you can click on it. Anytime you see this upside down triangle, it means you can click and hold, and various drop-down menus will arise. So we have what's known as the marquee tool selected for our secondary editing, for our secondary tool. And so when you click Command on the keyboard, it shows up. This is our channel strip relating to this track. If we wanted another track, we're only dealing with audio now, so we could just double click in an empty slot and create more tracks. If we created too many, we can practice our hotkey by pressing Command Z. And if we actually wanted that audio too, we could just press Command Shift Z, because you can undo. Similarly, you can just press the plus button here, and when we start dealing with software instruments, that'll come in handy because we'll be able to choose a software instrument there. And then we went through a little bit about what these things are on top and said, don't really worry about them. We're gonna do the things that these buttons do, but we're gonna learn to do them using hotkeys and various other ways in the arrange window. We then looked at loops, Apple loops, media, Apple loops, and we grabbed an Apple loop and just clicked and dragged it in. We're not going to import the tempo information. This is the tempo. So you can see there's a tempo mismatch, right? This is 130 and this is set for 120. So if we just click and drag up here and make a loop, what we're hearing is actually slower than what it was created to be played at. But I mean, we can half the time almost and get some cool artifacts and totally change the nature of the beat. And then having the marquee tool, I'll just briefly go over a little bit of the editing we did. So we can zoom in this way, right, using these two menus there. If I select the marquee tool, I can cut, just randomly cut pieces here and there, just having fun. And if I press Option click, and let's say I create a new track, I can take whatever part I want and create, various beats out of it. Somehow, I assume it'll come together. It'll probably sound pretty weird because I've just been doing it randomly to show you the functionality. But let's see how this sounds. So if we were to highlight this, option, click and drag everything over again, might have kind of a cool glitchy beat. I don't know when you'd ever use it, but we could also then, one other thing to keep in mind is we talked about doing like a floating gain, where we can take this is a sample that we used. This is an audio object. We also refer to the sample as an audio object. Any discrete unit that looks like this in the sequencing window, in the arrange window, we call an audio object. And if you highlight, whatever you highlight, you can adjust the gain, and up and down by simply going into this inspector window here, and ensuring that we click correctly here. So I mean, we might want to go like, we might want to do something. So this is set for -27, and I can now up it to +2, see what that does, and try to, you know, change the beat around that way. Just it's pretty glitchy. Not saying it's the best thing in the world. Anyways, another hotkey. If we wanted to bounce this, we can mute and solo, right? And then these are the mixing window, the piano roll editor. Those are the two that are going to be the main windows we're working with. If we look at the mixer, we can see that this is the inserts. That's where we get our plugins. We played with those. This is our bus sends. We're not worried about that. This is our input. We're not worried about that right now. We are worried about output. These are sent to stereo out. Remember that the stereo out is a 2-channel bus which aggregates all of the component tracks in a mix for output to left and right speakers. So if we have these 3 tracks, they're all going to stereo out. This is, you'll see here, down here, mute, solo, and then that's record enable and input monitoring, which you don't really need to worry about just yet. And then this is this tells you whether the sample is mono or stereo. This is mono. Let's say they're all mono. So the 3 mono tracks are then sent to the stereo out, which is a stereo out. This is output 1, output 2, or left, right, and we talked through that. But you should know that the stereo out, or the 2 bus, as it's sometimes referred to, aggregates all of the component tracks of a multi-track session file into stereo left and stereo right outputs. And this is the pan pot, and this is how the pan pot works. When the pan is set for center here, it's being equally sent to the left and right channel. When it's moved to the left, it's actually, the volume on the right is attenuated or turned down, and it makes it sound like it's more on the left. So if we take this as our example here, oops, don't worry about that, that was a mistake. You can see it's moving equally out on the left and right. As I pan to the left and pan to the right, you'll see that more volume gets sent to the corresponding channels. Right, so that's how panning works. Panning actually it's called a ganged volume switch, where even a mono signal is sent equally to the 2 bus, and then the volume of the left or right channel is attenuated as the pan pot is moved to the other side of the horizontal spectrum. So as you move the pan pot left, the volume on the right output is attenuated or turned down. So these are all sort of just a quick review of everything we did to solidify things. And I'll put a little list of the hotkeys in the description.